And a very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Navigation in the Age of Super Aggregators, which we're presenting with ThinkAnalytics. I'm Julian Clover. I'm one of the editors of Broadband TV News. I'm going to be joined over the next half hour or so by Peter Docherty, who is the founder and CTO of ThinkAnalytics, and by Tony Mooney, who's just joined the company as their SVP of Advertising. For those of you who don't know, ThinkAnalytics delivers content discovery and viewer insights to over 83 video service providers, serving more than 350 million subscribers in 43 languages. And who knows, it's possibly increased by since I wrote my notes. The customers include the BBC, Deutsche Telekom, Liberty Global, Vodafone, the list goes on. And over the next little while, we're going to be discussing measurement, analytics, the growing role of artificial intelligence, and how operators are getting it right. Now, let's say hello to both Peter and to Tony. I should mention that we're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of all of this. So if you've got a question, all you need to do is to type it in. You probably noticed at the bottom of the screen, and let's face it, we've been on hundreds of Zooms over the past few months. You've noticed the Q&A symbol, two little bubbles there, bottom right. If you've got a question, type it in there, and then I'll put that to either Peter or Tony or both at the end of this webinar. So the title is, of course, looking at particularly search and discovery across the number of the so-called super aggregators, the operators who combine a cable, a satellite, an IP service, and put that together with other companies' services. And Peter, I think they seem to be services not just from video, but over a whole wide range of different topics these days.
Yeah, thanks, Julian, for the introduction and hosting the webinar today. And yeah, like you said, I mean, ThinkAnalytics, we've been in the content discovery and analytics space for over 15, 20 years, and a whole variety of different kinds of, really extensive range of customers in various parts of the world, throughout Europe, America and Asia. And they cover a whole variety of different types of content, like you say. So across all those different kinds of services, pay TV, OTT, whether it be ad funded or SVOD or TVOD, public broadcasters. Between them, they have a whole variety of different kinds of content and different offerings for their viewers and their listeners, of course. So it's not just about video, although that's very important, but we have audio, radio content, podcasts, a whole variety of sources, really all about trying to engage the end viewer or listener, the end subscriber, with a whole variety of content that you have available for them.
And I guess the trick is to link things together. So if I'm searching for, say, David Attenborough, I want to be able to find him whether or not he is on the BBC or NOS for that matter, perhaps, or if he's on Discovery, or perhaps as a radio show, he's been interviewed somewhere, and I want to be able to find the content about Sir David wherever I'm looking.
Exactly, and I think that the same thing applies to having to know exactly what channel something is on, or what station, or what part of the VOD catalogue that a certain piece of content happens to be in. The most important thing from the viewers or the listener's perspective is to find the content, or to be proactively presented with content without having to work so hard to find it. And I think that's what we're seeing, and we've kind of been talking about this for quite a few years. We've been capable of having sort of super aggregation, multiple sources of content within the engine for discovery and search purposes. That's been a capability we've had for more than 10 years. And now it's becoming more and more important for the consumers, because before you could have hundreds of channels, maybe the VOD catalogues were relatively small to begin with. The VOD catalogues are getting larger and larger, with catch-up content as well. And then you add in, you know, maybe a large radio catalogue, you add in potentially other sources of content, like podcasts or other OTT catalogues. And so all of that is coming into the mix, making it a larger and larger problem for the consumer. So
and it's interesting, the days of an operator or somebody at a trade show, remember those, saying to you, oh, I'm limiting my catalogue to 600 titles because, you know, the consumer can't cope with anymore, it's too much choice. That's gone out of the window completely, hasn't it?
Exactly, and there is of course such a thing as too much choice, because if you present people with a vast array of choices, then it can look just too much for them. And presenting a shorter list of just exactly the right choices to somebody makes it much more likely that they're going to actually select something and start watching, rather than overwhelming them with content and just splattering that across the screen.
And I guess that's where you get the importance of being able to narrow down a search between, yes, again, it's a trade show example, isn't it? It's like, show me movies by Tom Hanks. And Tom has made so many movies over the years that you just can't find what you're looking for. And because he goes to a variety of genres, the ability, I guess, to say, oh, show me comedies starring Tom Hanks, then that really does help. And I guess you can probably go even deeper still.
Yeah, and that's something that, you know, is a use case that can be very valuable. So being able to understand, so without even actually the consumer having to say, I want to see comedies with Tom Cruise, we could obviously know that they actually prefer comedies. And so if you're presenting that individual with a list of Tom Cruise movies, we can get exactly the right ones for them at the top of the list. So, you know, yourself, me, Tony, we could all have a different list of Tom Cruise movies, or the same list in a very different order, in order to get the very best ones for each of us at the front of the list. And then on top of that, being able to handle or support the case of, yes, I want to see Tom Cruise comedy movies, but it does go deeper, like you say. So understanding the content and understanding the viewer at a much, much deeper level is something that's really important to us. And so you're not just looking at cast and crew and genre-based navigation or learning, but having a real sort of understanding of the content that's available, so that when I watch something, the system is able to learn a vast amount more about my likes and dislikes. And that's where our information science element of the engine comes into play.
So we're getting into artificial intelligence at this point then, are we?
Exactly, and that can be applied in many different areas of the end-to-end solution. So part of that can be applied, and like you mentioned at the beginning, we're supporting 43 languages today, and that's all about that content understanding. So those moods, themes, settings, subjects, time periods, audiences, and so on, being able to understand the content at that level, and also not just having only one way of making recommendations. So having a whole variety of algorithms, AI, machine learning to support a wide range of different use cases, user experiences on different devices. All of that comes into play as well. So the machine learning and AI can play a part end to end throughout the whole discovery process.
And presumably at some point in the either in the customer acquisition process, or perhaps an operator is introducing a new service, the customer will be asked to sign a box and say, tick a box somewhere and say, yeah, I'm okay with all of this.
Yeah, and I think you know, consumers see the benefit of this. It's not about, you know, harvesting data across the internet. You're within that environment of that pay TV or public service broadcaster, the OTT platform, and from the consumer's perspective, it is actually making their life easier. And we see that from a whole variety of metrics that our customers are measuring and that we're helping to measure for them on both things like NPS and customer satisfaction, at one end, right through to, you know, hard data on increased viewing, you know, a wider variety of viewing that takes place, getting to the content faster so that from the start of that browsing experience and getting somebody watching something as quickly as possible. And that's important to make sure that they don't press the off button and go and do something else. So that's where being able to do these in real time is important. So being able to learn from those early interactions very, very rapidly, get the right content in front of that person and get them watching or listening as quickly as possible.
And I guess that's where some of the super aggregator part of this comes in, because an operator is looking, well, it used to be, you know, the operator's service and Netflix, but now you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon Prime, you've got goodness knows how many different regional services according to whereabouts in the world you are on top of all of that, from public broadcasters, so MediaTek in Germany, or SVT Play up in Scandinavia, BBC iPlayer and Channel 4 and many others in the UK market. And if they're with the operator, then that basically means that the consumer is not going to wander off to that Apple box they bought a year or so ago to get that one important service which the operator doesn't have.
Yeah, and I think also as a consumer, you don't want to have, if you're looking for something to watch, you don't want to have to go into 6 different apps, you know, changing connections on your TV or flipping input sources in order to find something to watch. You know, you're looking to be entertained. So from that sort of lean back perspective, being able to do search and discovery and recommendations across all these different catalogues, make it easy for the consumer, understand what they subscribe to, what they haven't subscribed to, and be able to just present the right content to them at the right time from the whole variety of different sources. And like you say, it's not just about having 1 or 2. You know, we've got customers that have got 5 and 6 different OTT services in addition to their VOD catalogue and their extensive range of linear TV channels. So the problem's got bigger from the consumer's perspective. And what we're all about is making it easy again, making it easy to start watching something that we know the person's going to like.
I noticed a number of operators are starting to add in individual profiles and Netflix style, if you like. So, you know, mum, dad, the kids can have one. And interestingly, I've seen a few with family now. So for those families which do still talk to each other and sit down and decide what to watch, then presumably that's like well, I guess it's just another profile really, but presumably does that make your job easier or more difficult, or with all the artificial intelligence around it, maybe it doesn't matter?
I mean, we've been able to cope and have support for all those scenarios in the product for quite a number of years. So starting off with a shared device, so, you know, if you don't activate a profile and you're on a big screen on your set-top box, then the engine is able to not just do family recommendations and put all of the viewing profile together into one, but to be able to see those patterns that are happening at different times of day or different days of the week. And we can support an individual logged in experience, which could then go across multiple devices. And you can even have anonymous session-based users where you can still absolutely learn and give personal recommendations to them. Even though, let's say in an ad-funded service, they might not have an actual subscription. So we're able to cater for all of those scenarios. And in any operator, some people might activate a profile and other people might prefer not to. And so I think it's important to be able to handle all of those.
You mentioned ad-funded services there, which is possibly a good segue to move across to Tony. Before I do so, I'll give a quick mention if there are any questions that anyone has. We'll go through some of those once we've spoken to Tony, and just pop those in the little Q&A box, bottom right of your screen, which should be anyway, and we'll then see if we can take some questions, and we'll do that probably after 10 or so minutes time after we've spoken to Tony. Tony, you're a relative newcomer to ThinkAnalytics, just come on board in the last couple of weeks. What made you come and join Peter and his colleagues?
Well, I've known ThinkAnalytics for a long time, actually. I think I was one of the first customers of the company back about 20 years ago when I worked as CRM director at Orange. Now, I've been semi-retired for, I guess, for about 3 years now, having left Sky. But I hooked up again with ThinkAnalytics and talked to Pete about the aspirations that ThinkAnalytics had to use their decision and artificial intelligence capability for targeted addressable TV advertising. And of course, that's something that I've done in spades back in my Sky days. And so there's a sort of a nice sort of syzygy there between my knowledge of the ThinkAnalytics product in terms of best next action and decisioning, and also this sort of targeted TV addressable advertising, which piqued my interest.
You mentioned Sky there, and also Channel 4 in the UK. I know the French are getting underway with some targeted advertising as well now amongst some of the really big commercial broadcasters there. How sophisticated would you say the market is now, and what can you do to maybe drill down and give the advertiser and the advertising agencies something even better in terms of getting the absolute right consumer and the right product in front of them?
There's no doubting that the world has moved on. You know, back, if I think sort of, goodness, 9 years or so ago, 10 years ago, when we started Sky AdSmart, then it was a very different place. Now, the different sort of geographies and the capabilities in different geographies are sort of moving at different paces. The UK's now reasonably advanced. The Sky AdSmart product is out there on the Sky platforms and also now in Virgin too. And that's taken at least some of the world of sort of online targeting into the world of TV, which is really, no doubt at all, really good. Not without its challenges, not specifically technically, but also commercially for both media agencies and advertisers in terms of how they buy this stuff and how it fits in with their normal deal-based spot TV, you know, buying. So that sort of admixture of old linear and playback, and then, you know, the VOD market all combining, and then you've got online, it just makes it a bit more complicated. I think the bit that interests me, being someone that's, you know, been in insight and decision science for 30 years, my interest is mostly about the consumer and consumer insight. And my background's been very much in understanding how, as consumers, our past behavior is a predictor of their future behavior. And as Pete was explaining in terms of content discovery, you know, that's just a good application of taking a viewer's past behavior, applying, in this case, artificial intelligence algorithms to that viewing behavior, and then throwing up a prediction of the best next thing that the consumer might want to watch. Well, if you think about that sort of generically, then the same sort of thing should apply to advertising. The two are I think, immutably linked, particularly for a TV operator that's looking to drive TV engagement, which then drives engagement with the platform and subscriptions. You know, equally, advertising kind of follows that same kind of path. One wants consumers that are engaged with the programs and the advertising such that you can sell your inventory. So for me, a lot comes back to then the understanding of the viewer. And this is where I think the market has come a long way. In my Sky days, we bought that a long way back from the old Barb days, or whatever, in whatever country, you know, you're using the sort of simple demographics by which we used to buy TV, still buy TV today. We took that a step forward and introduced more third-party lifestyle data of the kind you would get from Experian or Axiom or other people.
Because
So
Sky, like Channel 4, has built its own database
right.
up, haven't they? So
That's right.
to really profile the customers,
viewers.
and presumably that sort of thing, once you add the information that you guys at ThinkAnalytics can work out, becomes particularly powerful to an advertiser.
Yeah, so to my mind, it's, all these things are building up a richer profile of the consumer, which then can be used for what I see as like a holy trinity of benefits. So as I think you were alluding to, and Peter was alluding to, firstly, the consumer is seeing more relevant adverts. And as we found in my Sky days, we had a very high consent to targeted advertising because consumers would see that as a benefit. So it's got a consumer benefit. It's clearly got a TV operator benefit to it as well, because more relevant advertising means that the value of your inventory then and your viewers goes up. And of course, it's a benefit to the advertiser because the last thing you want to do is to waste your advertising on the wrong target. So one of the things that we're looking at and we're quite excited about is how we apply the ThinkAnalytics engine, that engine that does best next content recognition, is equally capable of generating very richer profiles than you would ever normally see in conventional TV demographics, richer profiles and segments and hyper segmentation that will enable advertisers to really get very targeted about the people they want to advertise to, and operators to get a little more differentiated. I think there's a big opportunity there for TV operators to start to sell the richness of the viewers to their particular platform.
So I wonder
that's where I see it.
Yeah, is it possible perhaps then to say, right, if somebody's living in a certain street, in a certain town or city, and they're watching this show, does that dispose them more to, or collection of shows, I suppose, rather than just one, does that then put them in a position where you can say, right, well, we know this consumer is like this and they're watching this, so their attitude is this, and as a result of that, you can sell them a particular product?
Yes, I think as sort of Peter alluded to in the content question, where a kind of ThinkAnalytics approach or an AI approach makes that better is that it deals with the complexity. So as you were alluding to, it's not just someone that's watched this. I mean, that's very conventional kind of advertising. Someone that watches X Factor, gets this advert. What we're talking about here is being able to pull in a whole variety of information about viewing behavior. It could be day part, it could be genre, it could be the sub attributes that Peter was alluding to in content, mood, sentiment, and so on and so forth, and transaction data and account data, so that you're building up a portfolio view, of the viewer, and something that would not be possible to either buy from as a third-party piece of data, or indeed to understand from web data. It's unique to the viewing experience. And certainly my experience at Sky was that we were able to extract some very interesting and unique insights, based on the principle of you are what you watch, which you could then turn into attributes that would be very useful to advertisers. My final point on this is, I think about it in perhaps sort of the opportunity in two senses. Firstly, that using TV viewing data can help you understand the affinity of a customer to a particular sector or brand or whatever it is you want to sell. The other opportunity is how viewing data can help us understand intention. So in the same way that you would see in online advertising, when someone's in the market, for searching for something or other, there's also the opportunity using TV viewing data to start to predict intention as well. Now that's not done at the moment, but that I think could be a really powerful tool for advertisers.
And I guess we'll all be familiar with where we're looking for a particular product at this moment in time. I have a bit of a heating issue in my house, so I'm looking for heaters. If I'm doing that online, I'm fairly sure that within a very short space of time, every other website I look at will have an ad for heaters. Would it be possible, and I don't know if I really want this or not, to then turn on the television, and watching by my operator, and all of a sudden I've got an advertisement from the electrical shop. Would you like to buy a heater, Julian?
Well, that would be the. I mean, that's exactly the vision we had at Sky with AdSmart, with a kind of cross-platform approach. Without wishing to sound too big brother about it, because it doesn't quite work like that. But yes, in principle, the idea was that in conventional TV terms, you have reach and frequency, and you just you buy TV, and you buy enough TV to get the ratings you want by reach or frequency. If you take that concept and just say, well, I don't care where I get the contacts from or the views from, it could be one online, the next one TV, and I still achieve the same result, but quicker and cheaper, then that's what you'd want to do. So I think there's a bit of more than a bit of work that needs to go on to make what you just said there real, but I think that's got to be the direction of travel.
And I guess, despite my reservations, if a concern, as you've alluded to earlier on, if a consumer is given the do you want to watch more advertising that is relevant to you question, chances are most of them are ticking yes to that.
Yeah, it's certainly my kind of 3 decades experience of consumer marketing. This area of consent and data protection, is a tricky one. In all my experience, what I boil it down to is it's less really about the collection of the data. It's more about how organizations responsibly use it. And in my experience, if you're responsibly using data, then your customers tend to be a lot more relaxed about it. If your use of data is invasive or a bit creepy, that's before we even get to the edges of regulatory questions, then customers don't like it. And as I say, that was certainly my experience. So we found it easy to collect consent for targeted advertising. Frankly, people were very relaxed about it. They were a lot less relaxed when you started to move into some areas of web or some of the deep packet inspection type data. That people will get very, very nervous about that. So I think it's all about how organizations use it. And if you use it in a way that is good for the advertiser, good for the operator, good for the customer, what's not to like?
And I guess from the advertiser or the advertising agency as well, there's some advantages to it. If I'm a big motor manufacturer, Ford perhaps, and I'm going to have a whole range of cars and I'm going to want to buy a slot, safe in the knowledge that some of my audience to the football match are going to be driving the larger cars in the range, and other ones, probably me, living in the centre of a city, are going to be wanting a smaller car to drive.
That's exactly what we used to, what we do with Sky AdSmart. It allowed multi-brands or brands with multi-products to essentially buy their inventory and then segment it by, particular sub-brands that they had. So that that's really good. It's also useful. I mean, self-evidently, geography is much easier when you have targeting. But even in this profiling, one of the things that we saw at Sky was we were bringing new money into advertising that would normally find that medium with too high a wastage. So premium car brands. Or
and how much further on top of that can ThinkAnalytics add? Because I can imagine operators saying, "Well, I've got my system; I don't need anything else." There is a definite added value that ThinkAnalytics can bring.
Yeah, I think so. There are sort of I kind of see 4 steps in the ascent of profiling, if I can call it that. As I mentioned, step 1 was the old version of TV demographics, ABC1 men, etc., etc. The 28 demographics that we have in the UK, for example. Step 2, as you move into targeting, is then third-party data like Mosaic or Acorn or lifestyle data that gives you a bit more of a rich profile. Step 3, then, if the operator has the analytical capability and collects the data, is the use of viewing data to then derive additional profiles, and they could be profiles about the nature of the viewer on the platform. And of course, those can be combined with both the first and second level. And then when you get very sophisticated, and this is something I did at Sky, where some advertisers wanted to combine their own customer data with the viewing data to understand their putative audiences in terms of their own nomenclature, taxonomy, segmentation, then they could do that. And those advertisers that had sort of direct consumer relationships, in other words, they knew when their customers bought something, could be financial services or a mobile phone company, they had the wonderful ability to understand both the provenance and antecedents of the whole path to purchase. They knew that they put an ad out, they knew who viewed that ad, and they knew whether that person came into store or online and purchased something. That's a perfect ROI, you know, for your advertising. And we did that for quite a number of big suppliers. So that's my fourth point. Now, stages 3 and 4, that analytical, working the viewing data and then doing the matching bit, that requires a reasonable, sophisticated analytical capability. You can either do that with lots of people manually coding, which is I have done, and it takes time and it's not cheap, or you can use a capability like ThinkAnalytics, which would, using artificial intelligence and algorithms, can generate that kind of profiling very quickly and very dynamically as well.
I guess speed is a lot of the important factor, I guess, on that.
Particularly if it's intent, you know, as we talked about intention data, you know, if someone's in market, they won't be in market for very long. So speed is of prime essence there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, again, for my heaters, I need warmth. That's definitely true. Right, we'll do some questions now. If you want to ask anything, just use a little Q&A box, which, unless you've changed the order of what things look like on screen, you're looking bottom right Q&A, and slip a question in there. We have one, which is anonymous, and measurement is really a challenging area in relation to content campaign analysis. Understanding what works and what doesn't. Can you maybe share your experience of how the market is dealing with that right now? I don't know if who wants to take that. Peter, do you want to have a first stab?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that in the discovery space, probably if you turn the clock back 10 years, everybody thought, well, yeah, the recommendations are good, you know, we like them. They didn't necessarily know exactly what was happening, what was working and what wasn't working. And so that was an area that we've addressed as part of the suite, to be able to have an entire analytics and insight platform. And this can apply, like Tony was saying, in the ad space in terms of understanding campaign effectiveness. We've been applying it in the content discovery space, and really all around, you know, understanding not just in recommendations, but in the user experience, in the content, what's working, what's not working, what can we do about it, and also the ability to run A/B tests. And so having a sort of virtual circle, or a virtuous circle rather, of being able to run A/B tests very easily, assess the effectiveness of the change that you've made, push the winner into production and run another test, and being able to go around that loop very rapidly and easily without a large IT project. And what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years is more and more success metrics, because there's no downside. Either you find out that something's working as well as you hoped or expected, and you've got hard data to back that up, or you find something that isn't working the way you'd hoped, and you've got hard evidence to say that it's not working, and therefore we're going to make a change in order to improve that area. And so that's something that we've seen working, you know, incredibly well, to be able to have that constant improvement of the whole experience, again, always for the consumer.
It's interesting, if you go back, say, you know, only 10, 15 years, as a journalist, you get very excited if you discovered that somebody was going to make a change to their EPG or program guide. You think, ah, major story coming up here. But now, of course, because the web and the various apps are basically pushing out updates on a weekly, if not a daily basis sometimes, and the speed at which the satellite, the cable, the IP, TV technology companies can do changes, they can, I guess, create their new thing in 30 days, put it to your A/B test, and then decide if they're going to stick where they were or if they want to take on the new look.
Exactly, and you've got that hard data, and I think one of the key points is making it easy for people to execute these tests. So it's not an IT project. It doesn't take 3 months. Like you say, you can set up an A/B test, you can push that into production, and you can assess the results. And it gives you that experience of being able to do that and having the hard evidence and being able to take it right down to the individual. So you can have the overall part that certain carousels or parts of the UI are driving the most viewing, or a particular use case. You know, like we had with the BBC recently, they did an A/B test and it produced a significant increase in viewing. It gives you that ability to do that, but we can take it a step further and also have even a dynamic user experience. And so for me, certain carousels might be driving a lot of my viewing. They might not be the same as the ones that are driving your viewing or Tony's viewing. So also having the ability to have a dynamic and personalised user experience is something that we can do as well.
I'm liking our next question, actually. So I did want to ask about the editorial side of things. I know some operators want to give you their own recommendations, be they sort of editorialized, or maybe it's just the movie they want you to buy. And the question we have is, well, really surrounding the debate of editorial curation versus algorithmic selection. Is there a hybrid approach which can work for that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You don't want the expertise and experience of the editorial staffs, obviously, can be hugely important. And they might want certain things to be in a certain location for a period of time. But you can combine that editorial experience with personalisation and the AI and have a personalised editorial carousel. And we've seen a lot of success in deploying that around the world, where you're getting the best of both worlds. So it's not either or. Some of them might be purely editorial, some of them can be purely algorithmic driven, and others are a combination of both.
Just out of interest, what sort of time back do you go? You know, if I had, for the sake of argument, an interest in sci-fi about 12 months ago, then I've just recently started to watch, you know, detective shows instead. Is there like a period of time over which you might be showing me the sci-fi before moving on to having predominantly detective shows?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to sort of jump from one extreme to the other. So there can be seasonal content. There could be things that you're interested in which might change over time. So having a viewing, and like Tony said, it's not just about a snapshot. It's not a one-off picture. It's about a pattern that's emerged and developed. And so you can have, you know, you might just watch something as a one-off, or that might develop into an actual behavioural pattern. The same thing, like Tony was saying on advertising. You can be in the market or have an intention to buy something for a short period of time, and then once you've bought that product, you might not have any intention to buy it again for a considerable period of time. So in that case, acting in a very timely way is very important. In the case of content, letting those patterns emerge. I mean, it might be on different platforms. You might have different levels of viewing coming in. So if you had let's say a transactional VOD platform, you'd probably have less viewing information than you will in an ad-funded or a PTV environment. And so the effect from various different time periods might be different from one deployment to another. And again, that's where we don't just have a black box where it's one size fits all. It's about being able to tailor and customize the engine to meet the business objectives and the local conditions for that particular customer.
Okay, right. We've got a few questions coming in now, so I'll need to maybe try and get through as many as we can. Still time if you want to add one of your own, but Rajiv is asking, and I guess it's kind of almost follows on from the last answer, but can contextual targeting replace behavioural targeting? I think you might have to explain to me at least as to what those two things are. I think I know, but I want to be sure.
I mean, I think from the content space, obviously what you have is, I think it's important not just to have one magic algorithm or one way of doing things, because no matter how good that is today, tomorrow there could be something better, or in 6 months. And obviously for all the consumers that you're either advertising to or presenting content to, then they can have different perspectives of how they like to be engaged. And so using contextual information about what you're doing right now, that can be important. But like Tony was saying, in the ad space, they've done contextual targeting for many years, and adding behavioural information and the kind of data that we are talking about can enrich that and enhance it and take it to another level as well. Tony?
Yeah, all I'd add to that is, if the question is, can or should contextual replace behavioural? My blunt answer is no. Why would you? Why would you do that? But it's just as Pete says, the thing about behavioural data is that as human beings, our greatest sort of emotion and action is habit. And habits define us, and habits sort of will not only tell us kind of what we've done, but what we'd like to do in the future. And that's essentially what behavioural stuff is. Now, it's not perfect, and you shouldn't just have behavioural on its own, because that isn't the complete answer. And as Pete says, very, very often contextual is vitally important. So my own view would be, why stop anywhere? If I'm, in my years doing consumer marketing, I would take attitudinal, behavioural, contextual. I would take the lot. I would throw any, techniques at it, because, human beings think and they feel and they say and they do. And you need to understand all those things as far as possible. I can't look inside their minds, but I would take it all. So yeah, so why restrict oneself?
Okay, that makes sense. How important is the UI to the overall viewer experience, and can it be personalized? A question also says, how do you test what works? I guess you've sort of answered that with the A/B testing side of things.
Yeah, I mean, the UI is obviously very important because it's what the consumer sees, and I think that's part of our experience, our tribal knowledge, as our CEO puts it, of what works and what doesn't work, or what hasn't worked in the past for other operators, and being able to give the benefit of that knowledge and experience to our customers to help. We're not designing the whole UI for them, but the UI is obviously very, very important, because that's what the consumer is interacting with up to the point where they press play or start watching something. And it absolutely can be personalised, because that's why we're here. That's what we're doing for the last 15 years to all those hundreds of millions of viewers. And the question is, to what degree? And a bit like Tony said, there could be some platforms where you can only personalise to a certain extent, or there might be limitations, and there's other platforms where you can do a lot more. And we've got the ability to go as far as any of our customers want to go in personalising that experience. And in terms of, does it work? Obviously, you have the A/B testing capability to assess whether it works. And we've got metrics from hundreds of millions of viewers around the world, which absolutely prove that it works.
And I guess once you've given the results to an operator, it's up to them as to how they then choose to implement it using the information that you've provided.
Yeah, I mean, it's a collaboration. So we're very happy to have an ongoing engagement with our customers, just like they want to have an ongoing engagement with their viewers. So we can either, put all the tools and the data in the hands of the customer, and they can go and do all that themselves without any issues, or it can be a collaboration where it's together. So we're helping them get the best. In the end, it's their decision, because it's their platform with their customers. So they are in complete control. But we're more than happy, and we see a lot of results and good, relationships that we've had customers for over 10 years who've been with us through the whole evolution of our platform and the evolution of their platforms to have more and more and more benefits of the personalisation.
And presumably, you know, the customer gets updated as you go along, as it were, as new techniques come about. You're able to, I guess, let out more tools to the customer as you have them yourselves.
Exactly. I mean, I don't even know how many releases, obviously, of our product that we've done, added new capabilities like the sort of dynamic user experience part of the product, editorial tools to allow them to target campaigns, the viewer insight platform, the new advertising solution. So we're obviously constantly innovating, listening to our customers, coming up with their own ideas. So the platform is getting deeper and richer and wider. And like I said, we've never been based on the concept of one magic wand, or I've invented the best algorithm in the world and it's going to solve all of your problems, because unfortunately that's not how the real world is. And you need to be constantly pushing yourself and customers pushing us to have more and more and more capabilities, so that they're upgrading and taking those new capabilities and pushing them out into the field.
And presumably, we should probably finish in a moment or two. We've we had algorithms there. Our final question relates to algorithms as well. In your experience, does a well-rounded, unified set of algorithms work well for all operators, or do you find a bespoke approach yields better results? I think I kind of know the direction you would go in based on the answer to the last question, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's not so you need a variety. So a bit like what Tony said, having everything bespoke just means you need to have a large team of people probably manually doing everything or coding everything, and you don't have the advantage. Let's say with us, we have those 350 million viewers, and all the R&D that we're putting in is available to our customers. But that does not mean that it's a black box that everyone gets exactly the same. So there's a huge amount of customization that's available. You could also have your own bespoke techniques or custom techniques added into the platform. So I think you probably guessed that I was going to say this, but I think we've got the best of both worlds in that you have such a lot out of the box, but there's also a massive amount that you can do to customize that and make it do exactly what that operator needs it to do.
Okay. Well, Peter, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. You too, Tony. I'm sure if anybody has any further questions, they can email ThinkAnalytics or send something along to myself at Broadband TV News, and we'll do our best to point you in the right direction. But time to wrap things up. So for me, Julian, Clover, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you'll be able to see you again soon on another webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.